So good day everyone. So I'm Ethel, I'm Banting, and for today's topic, we will discuss ethnocentrism and cultural relativism, lesson number 3. So, for today's topic, we will learn to identify what is ethnocentrism and how can we promote and advocate cultural relativism. So, let us define first the meaning of the word ethnocentrism. So, ethnocentrism comes from two words, ethno, which means people or nation, and centric, which means center. So, the view that one group is superior compared to another. In an ethnocentric viewpoint, a group is considered as the center or core of everything. The tendency to evaluate other cultures in terms of one's own and conclude that other cultures are inferior, barbaric, or immoral. So, therefore, when we see ethnocentrism, you're ethnocentric if you're thinking that your own culture is better than another culture. Therefore, the practice of competing other cultural practices with those the one's owns and automatically finding those cultural practices to be inferior is known to be ethnocentrism. So, for us to understand more the concept of ethnocentrism, I have here two examples. So, the first example here is Adolf Hitler. I guess you're all familiar with Adolf Hitler, one of the key prominent personality shooting the World War II at the height of his leadership in Nazi Germany. He promoted the idea of the avian of German supremacy, and these ideas of the German supremacy is what we as ethnocentrism. If you have this strong pride or you have this strong pride and proud of your culture, then you manifest what you hold as ethnocentrism. You manifest ethnocentrism if you have a strong or feeling of superior in terms of superiority of your culture, and you find other days, other culture, other group of people as inferior. And your culture as superior, then that is an example of manifestation of ethnocentrism. We also have your next example. If you perceive that your cuisine or your culinary is considered as superior compared with the others, then it is also considered as a classic examples of ethnocentrism. So further, ethnocentrism is the view that one's own cultural elements such as norms of value, ideology, costumes, and traditions are dominant and superior to others. So ethnocentrism is a technical name to say things in which one's own cultural identity is the center of everything, over which all must be skilled, rated, and referred to. And this perspective led to conceited behavior and the beliefs of the superiority of one's own group with a great prejudice or judgment to outsiders. And so for us to understand more the concept of ethnocentrism, let's have you, for example, one of the distinct culture or characteristics of the Thai cuisine. We all know that the Thai cuisine is known for serving exotic as part of their street food, like for example, the fried crickets and the fried scorpions are polite insects, which for us other people or for us outsiders will find this delicacy or cuisine as odd or different or something weird. And applying our lesson, we should not gauge their culture based on our barometer or measurement of what should be standard when it comes to cuisine. Therefore, we should not be judgmental. We should not be judgmental or judging, for example, the food or cuisine of other country. We should avoid being ethnocentric or other culture in terms of their traditions, costumes, and yes, even cuisine. So when you become ethnocentric, you also become ethnocentric if you believe that there are primitive cultures, especially if their way of life is different from ours or from yours. So therefore, we should be culturally sensitive because there's no such thing as primitive cultures. Let's proceed now to the next important concept of our topic, and that is cultural relativism. So, cultural relativism refers to an objective analysis of one's own culture, seeing and understands of one's beliefs and traditions from his or her point of view. It also entails not to judge the practice of others based on your own cultural, hence respecting in your own cultural context. Cultural relativism is a belief that cultures is relative and different from one another. Thus, it is important to respect another culture. We should all remember that there is no such thing as superior culture. It is important to understand and respect the different ways and manners and accept the uniqueness of traditions. Because no culture should be considered better than another. Different cultures should be accepted, tolerated, and of course appreciated rather than condemned. And so, according to James Rachel 2003, the following claims have all been made by cultural relativists. So the first one is each society has diverse set of moral conducts, and there is no objective standard that can be used as a basic of compassion among societies. And high tolerance among all cultures must be exercised always. So we should have tolerance. The key word for cultural relativism is the word respect and tolerance. Now, when we say cultural relatives, these are people who believes and says culture asserted, meaning when you say that it varies, meaning you do not judge other people practices and understand that there is no such thing as right or wrong, nor good or bad when it comes to culture. So, ethnocentrism is being insensitive to others' cultures, while cultural relativism show high cultural sensitivity. So, avoid ethnocentrism and promote cultural relativism. And our last concept, we have culture shock. It is a feeling of stress and anxiety that most people experience when encouraging a culture different from their own. Basically, we experience culture shock if we're on a different foreign land or if we're dealing with different people, we experience culture shock. Say for example, you're an OFW and you spend, for example, your first few days or first few weeks working on different country and you're exposing to their customs and traditions, one might experience culture shock. So therefore, it is important for us to learn their culture before we go and about or before we visit or before we work on that country for us to minimize the effects of culture shock. So that will be all my report. Thank you for listening.